Welcome to Unapologetically Sensitive, a place to find connection and a sense of belonging, where you can learn, relate, laugh, and maybe even live a bolder, brighter life. I'm your host, Patricia Young. This is a weekly podcast where we talk about sensitivity and the richness that it adds, the strengths we have because of our sensitivity, and some of the challenges it poses as well. The information in this podcast is not a substitute for help from a licensed mental health professional. Hey there. To the creatives, healers, sensitives, and deep thinkers, welcome. I'm really glad you're here today. So, the date is July 20th, 2020. We are about 4 months into COVID. What I want to talk to you about today is really relationships, ruptures that happen in friendships and relationships, and how attachment plays a part in this. And I'm going to talk about some specific bumps that I've had in relationships that have really been helpful for me to observe what's going on and for me showing up in a really different way. As I'm talking to people with COVID, we're really having a hard time, some of us. There's lots of changes. We're hitting new levels of grief. We're needing more from our friends, some of us. Some of our friends are just not as available because everybody's going through their own process. And so if we have attachment wounds, they're going to be activated even more during this time. And so I really want to normalize that for you. Before I start on that, though, I want to just talk about a couple things around COVID and what I'm noticing that's going on. The first is quite a few of these episodes I've given the date, and if I could have talked to myself back in March, April, May, the beginning of June, up until the beginning of this month, I made comments like, I wonder if in 20 years we'll look back and wonder what COVID was. Well, it's pretty clear that I don't think anybody is ever going to forget what COVID is because COVID is around to stay for now. What I would imagine is happening, it's happening for me, is a whole new level of grief is setting in on two levels. One is this first year that we are living with COVID in whatever state it is in, I suspect that we will have a new surgence of grief as we hit every new peak. And right now we're well into summer. Whatever summer has looked like for people in the past, it's not probably looking that way this year. That's grief. Grieving whatever we do in the summer. And as fall comes and back to school, as we hit the holidays, trick-or-treating, Thanksgiving, and then whatever you celebrate over the holidays, whether that's Hanukkah, Christmas, Kwanzaa, if you're atheist and you don't celebrate anything, New Year's, whatever we do in those times, birthdays, anniversaries, is probably going to be looking really different because of COVID. And as each of those events hit, we are probably feeling a layer of grief. We may not identify it as grief. We may be getting busier. We may be getting less busy. We may be feeling irritable or tired or cranky or eating more. If we exercise, we may be exercising more to avoid feelings. None of these things are inherently good or bad, but I think it's really important to recognize what may be going on in dynamics, because I think the thing that's so tricky about COVID is, for many of us, our lives in some ways, we have food, we've got shelter, we're in the comfort of our homes. It may be cramped. We may not have the space that we had, but we've got internet and creature comforts. And so it's hard to, I think, sometimes to validate the suffering that we may be experiencing. This has been going on for a long time. This is unprecedented. The state of our country, if you're in the United States right now, it's a shirt show in the biggest way that there is. Dogs walk by, my window's open. That's Gracie. And so we're facing this uncertainty. We don't know what's going on in our country if you're in the U.S. And, so I just want to validate that these are all really challenging things. Now that, at least for us in the States, for those of us that thought that COVID, we'll do shelter in place, we'll go back to phase one, we'll slowly open up, and then we'll manage things, we are seeing that is just not the case. At this point, the U.S. is about 4% of the world's population, and the latest statistics that I saw is we have 25% of the cases of COVID in the U.S. Now, obviously, there are lots of metrics that we can look at, whether we're looking at hospitalizations or things like that. I don't want to get too far into this. It's significant is what my point is. I think many of us are having this whole new layer of grief that's coming in of this is going to be around for a while. This is not a little blip on the radar, and it's going to be around for a while. And so there's a new layer of acceptance and grief that goes with that. And whether you have kids or not, there's a lot of controversy in the States right now about what are we going to do with kids going back to school. My kids are in college. I'm having to kind of deal with what they're doing in their lives and how they're socializing or social distancing or not. But they're 20 and they get to decide what they want to do. I can't imagine what it's like for parents that have kids that are teachers, not kids that are teachers, but if you are a teacher in the current HSP course that we've got going right now, we've got 2 teachers. One of them is in Florida. The mandates to return back to school, I don't want to get into a political thing. I'm on empathy overload. I'm naming all of this stuff not to stress anybody out. That is not my intention. My intention is to name and validate all the layers that may be going on right now that are creating a new layer of discomfort. I'm hearing people having more anxiety. There's more symptoms of depression. If you need help, please get support. I want to validate if you're functioning well and you're having this layer of difficulty and you're managing, that's fine. If you need help, please get help. I don't want to minimize it. I just want to name what I'm seeing going on and the themes that I'm seeing coming up with clients right now. And this leads into what's going on with relationships. And I think for those of us that really crave connection, what I'm seeing for myself is I'm not getting enough stimulation. I'm not in that optimal zone for stimulation where I function really well. And I almost feel like a part of me has gotten, I was trying to think of the word the other day, and I can't think of what it is, but it's like I'm almost given up, that I'm really ambivalent. When I think about making plans with friends, I'm like, it doesn't matter. I don't know if it's going to really be fulfilling or satisfying. If you're a highly sensitive extrovert and you need that connection, when you don't get it, you can almost get depressed, and I feel really meh a lot of the time. I did have the pleasure of going for a walk with a neighbor yesterday. We've done some physical distancing walks, and it just fills me up when it happens, but I'm really aware of this ambivalence that I have around making plans. Maybe it's not going to work out, it's too much trouble, maybe I'm not going to enjoy their company, and I really think that it's this disconnect for me of not getting enough of what really fills me up, and with that narrative of needing more connection generally than other people do, and just having to be aware of that and having to figure out how to make plans. The other thing that I'm facing is my birthday's coming up at the end of the month, and my kids and their partners have come down for Father's Day and for my husband's birthday, and now everybody's living away from home. They've got jobs, and some of them are in school, and I found myself having that thing of like, I want them to come home, but I don't want to have to ask for it, and getting into that really irritated feeling of like, why can't they just do it for me? And why do I have to ask for it? I've talked about this before, and I haven't named that. I really think that goes back to childhood emotional neglect, that if our feelings were honored when we were younger and our needs were met and validated, we would have this good feeling about it's good to want people. It's good to ask for what we want. It's good to have that connection. And I think for many of us that didn't get enough of that, and we've got this fear of rejection, we go into either knowing what we want or wanting something and not knowing what it is, but not being willing to risk and put it out. And then that resentment of if people don't read our minds, then we get angry. When I recognize this, and I have some competition with my husband that I'm trying to decide how much to go into, because I don't want to shame any of my kids, because this is totally about me. I do talk freely about this with my husband, and he gets that this is about me, but I compare. Did they call you on this holiday, or did they text you? Did they call me? Did they text me? And I have some envy, and I'll tell you, he's the fun parent. He's the engaging parent. We've got boys. He does all kinds of things with the boys. I'm the glue that holds the family together. So if things are really serious, my kids come to me, but I'm not really the fun parent. So, I had some judgment around like, well, they came for his birthday, and would they come for my birthday? So what I did is I put out a group text to my boys and their girlfriends and let them know that I would love to have them come home. And so they are going to be coming home, and we're going to be spending time together. And it felt esteeming. And I had that fear of like, what if they can't come? What does that mean? Right now, especially with COVID, we are going to go through periods where we're going to be feeling more insecure. We're going to be feeling more irritable, more cranky, more sensitive. My son came home for the weekend and we were watching the new CG version of Lion King, and I'd seen it before. I sobbed like a baby a couple times through it, and I can just feel when it hits. It's in the pit of my stomach and that heaviness in my throat. I had to literally talk myself through it because it felt like it was trauma for me, because my tender heart is just unusually tender right now. This is a really hard time. I don't see how, as sensitive folks, we can't be picking up on the collective unrest that's going on. I'm really hoping that things are falling apart so that they can rebuild into a new way. And I don't even say it can't get any worse anymore, because this has just been 2020. What a year. What a year. And so again, if we are feeling more sensitive, more vulnerable, like, it just makes sense that stuff is going on right now. It is just a really challenging time, and we are all experiencing collective trauma. Whether we are traumatized by it or not, I can't say, but we are all experiencing collective trauma, and we are going into the unknown and staying in the unknown. It's a really hard time. When we're in a more solid place and people don't show up for us the way that we want them to, we can ride with it. And right now, things are just feeling much more tender. And what I'm finding with the clients that I'm talking to, what I experience myself is, I can go through periods and I feel really injured by what happens in relationships. And I want to talk about the overall theme is attachment. And I'm going to talk specifically about a few things that happened in this time period. But I was really fascinated to observe the process and to even see how my protective defense mechanisms would make up a story to help me feel better. And I see it as being adapted, but I also see where there were some errors in my thinking. So I'm going to try and share it with you. I've been postponing doing this episode because I really feel like I need to make copious notes to catch everything. And I just can't. If I don't sit down and record, it's just not going to happen. And then what happens is I listen back and I remember what I forgot. And my motto, done is better than perfect. I have twins. One of them moved out. They both moved out to college. One moved back in after a year of college and stayed home for a year and just moved out again. Right before he moved out, I've told you I have a friend that I talk to almost every day via Marco Polo. And we were talking before COVID hit. And then when COVID hit, we talk daily. And I have her permission to share this information with y'all. Right before Daniel moved out, she was going on vacation and she let me know I have limited data where I'm going, so I'm not going to be poloing. And so once a day, she would send me a text just kind of checking in, and I would respond and always ask a question, and she didn't respond. And then this was during that time period where Daniel and I thought he'd been exposed to COVID. I was having symptoms, so we were waiting to hear back. Just a very stressful time. And then Daniel moves out. My husband goes to Laughlin for, 7-8 days. He goes twice a year. I have feelings about him leaving. It's not a great time because I'm just not feeling stable, but I don't have the heart to ask him not to go. I can't do that. So he goes. And I feel resentful and envious at twice a year. He's got this great trip with a great friend. They laugh, they have a great time. And I feel envious and resentful. Not resentful that I don't want him to go and have a good time. Resentful that, I don't have a place that I go twice a year, and I don't have a friend that I go with, and I'm kind of jealous. And I can talk to him about this, and he knows that I want him to go. It's important for him to have a good time. When we have solid relationships with people, we can talk about these things, but I don't act out on it. So Steve comes home. Then Daniel came home for a weekend and he left. And during this whole time, this really close friend of mine is gone, and it's starting to activate my attachment issues. And I think there was a day or two where maybe I didn't text her, or she didn't text me. And so, then I'm just kind of wondering. She comes back and sends me a short polo, and I'm just having all of these attachment issues. For the week that Steve was gone, I have another friend who asked, how can I support you? And I said, it would really help if you could just check in with me by text periodically, just to help me feel connected. When we have attachment issues, it's like playing peekaboo with a baby, that it's a brand new thing when you cover your eyes and then you show up again. If you have attachment wounds, like when people aren't there, there's this fear that I'm forgotten or they're going to forget about me. I really sometimes have a challenge with that idea of permanence, that I matter and that people are thinking and taking me to heart. And I think because my love language is, I think it's acts of service, people showing up and doing things, showing me that they care is really important. So if I ask you, connect with me, and then I realized that a couple of days had gone by and I hadn't heard from this friend, and I'm already feeling wounded. My attachment wounds are already activated. That then I'm like, see, I asked for what I want and you don't even care, blah, blah, blah. And I just observed myself in this relationship for the next couple of days and showed up in the way that I could, took the space that I needed. It all sorted itself out. And I think historically I would have used that as like, I asked you to be here for me and you weren't, and I can't count on you. And it's like, COVID is making it hard for lots of people to show up right now. And for me to honor the feelings that I was having, but to not build a case against this person. And this person shows up when they're able to, and when they can't, it's not about me. So I want to be really clear that me talking about this is about my experience and how I'm navigating it. With a friend that went on vacation and we poloed, I started to go into my head about wondering how the relationship was going. And my kind of where I go is like, well, I've talked about maybe we trauma bonded over COVID, and then, she went away and realized that this relationship was just too heavy and she didn't want to come back into it. There was nothing that she said or did that warranted that, but this is the story that I make up in my head based on my previous wounding. So she comes back and she leaves a little bit of a polo, and I can't remember the exact sequence. This is kind of why I wish that I took the time to go back and listen to my notes. But I poloed her back and I just talked about, I'm kind of having these attachment wounds coming up. We've talked about this in our relationship before. And I said, and she's watching the polo, I said, I could use some reassurance. Are you still in? If you're not, I'm okay with that. But can you let me know? And I'm just kind of having some doubts, and I'm going to this place in my head where it's not really a great place. And my expectation, notice that word expectation, was that she would know to respond right away and reassure me. And she didn't. So this is in the morning when I'm walking the dog. It was really like I wanted to go to a place in my head of, and I did, of she doesn't want to be in a relationship with me anymore, and that's why she didn't respond, and no answer is an answer. And I came home and I cried to my husband because things are just really hard right now. If you listen to Amber Lansford's episode 77, something that she said when we talked has really resonated with me, and I've taken it to be a mantra, and it's that I can do hard things. And I've really been affirming that I can do hard things. And during this process with this friend that went on vacation, I kept reminding myself that I have been through so many friendship breakups. I've already lived through the worst of it. And I can do it. It's hard. Do I want to do it? Of course not. And I've done it, and I can do it again. I can do really hard things, and I can stay present for myself. So when we talk about, feeling the both and, I was allowing myself to feel the grief and the loss. Potentially, I didn't know that it was there, but it was coming up for me. And I was affirming that I really can do hard things, and I've been through friendship breakups a bunch of times. This was a relationship where because we talked every day, we talked about minutia, which is really important to me. If I talk to somebody, every couple of weeks or not very frequently, I don't talk about that minutia. But I think as HSPs, we pick up so much little stuff. And if we're verbal processors, it's really important to us. And what was interesting is I had reached out to a couple of other friends and was sharing I have this thing going on and I'm not sure if I'm good in this relationship. And I asked for reassurance and she was watching and she didn't come back on. And one of my friends that I really value her input, she said, well, no answer is an answer. And so I was going to polo the friend that didn't respond, saying, I'm thinking that your no answer is an answer. And if you can just tell me. And so in my mind, the story I made up is that, she broke up with me and she's not telling me. And then I made up a story about how I believe that she shows up in relationships and how this was in alignment with that to support this feeling of why she wasn't responding, making it about her. This is kind of an interesting thing. On one hand, I think it's a really healthy protective mechanism. When we have these little ruptures, there are two things that happen. We either externalize it. Where's the locus of control? This person has a problem with that. I'm not saying that this is true about this person, but I'm just saying in general. They have a problem with relationships. They can't be truthful, make it about them so that I feel better. That's protective. Or I take it to me where I'm the problem. I'm too much for people. I'm too intense. People can't handle staying in a relationship with me. She took a break. She realized that this was just too heavy. She doesn't want to be with me. We often do one or the other, or we swing to beating ourselves up. And when that gets too uncomfortable, the shame gets too uncomfortable, then we externalize and then we make it about the other person. So I just observed myself in this process and did nothing and just sat with it. It was very uncomfortable. Then that night, this friend pulled me back and was kind of chatting about all kinds of stuff. And then in the middle said, hey, just want to let you know we're good, and went on to other things. So then what came up for me was, I'm making a big deal out of this. Everything's fine. They don't even know that this is a big deal to me. And again, the internalization was, I'm making a big deal. I'm hard to be in a relationship with. There wasn't anything going on. They didn't even notice. And then I went to the other side of feeling almost gaslit, that this was really important. It was a big deal and they're not acknowledging it. And is that about their capacity? And I had talked about that I was having some attachment wounds coming up. And what I would like to be able to do is to talk about how that shows up in the relationship, that it's not their responsibility, but because it goes on for me and I'm really trying to work through it, I would like to do that. And she didn't mention it at all in this polo. So I felt really gaslit. And then I had to sit for another day with, how am I going to deal with this? What am I going to do? In the meantime, I am taking this 6-month course on attachment with Diane Poole Heller. And during our call, she can't even see us. And she did this exercise. I'm only going to tell you about the part that's relevant for this. So she can't even see me. She doesn't even know who I am. She breaks gaze with the camera and looks away. I'm crying, I'm sobbing, I'm feeling like she just rejected me, she's turning away from me, I'm too much. And we have the opportunity in this call to send a message to her. It's via Zoom, so you can use the chat function. And I said, hey, I'm doing good and I'm solid, but I'm working through some major attachment stuff. And when you looked away, I'm crying and I feel rejected, and this is really hard stuff. And I'm willing to do the feeling work to heal. So she reads my comment, she looks in the camera, and she says something to the effect of, Patricia, I'm getting tearful just thinking about this. She says something to the effect of, Patricia, I see you. I hear you. I know this is really hard for you. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. You do what you need to do to take care of yourself today. And if that means not being on the call, whatever you need to do to nurture yourself, but I hear you and I see you and I know that this is really hard. Obviously, as you can tell by my voice cracking right now, and I'm wiping tears away, this created more healing, feeling, crying, sobbing, release work for me. And obviously, I don't even know her, and her turning away activated more of this loss and abandonment for me. And what she says is, when we have these attachment injuries at an early age, it goes into implicit memory in our body. We don't even know that it's there. It bypasses anything cognitive. So it's not like we go, oh, this is what happened and this is what I feel. And so I was doing the healing work to release it. So lots of stuff is coming up. And again, I just kept affirming, like, I'm so brave and courageous. I'm so tenacious and willing to do the hard work, to do my healing work. And as I'm working through my own attachment injuries, what I'm seeing is these themes coming up with clients and bringing it to session, and in ways that are appropriate for the session, not making it about my process, but talking about some of the things that I noticed going on with me and the parallels of what's going on with the client. It's brought such depth to the therapeutic relationship that I have with clients. So I, continue to process this stuff. And then the next time I reach out to Polo, this friend who went on vacation, and there's Gracie again. She's going to go to the front door and bark like crazy now. what I said to my friend was, I kind of chatted and I said, I need to talk to you about something really hard and my heart is pounding and this feels like a hard conversation. And I said, it's very possible that I didn't make it really clear about what goes on for me around my attachment issues and what would be really helpful for me. So I'm going to give you some information now. And so I laid out some of the things that I told you. I explained about this exercise that I did, what my response was, and that I'm trying to think if I told her that I wasn't feeling seen and heard. I'm pretty sure that I did. And what I also said was, I really get that not everybody wants to do the depth of work that I do. I get that, and that's really okay. And if this feels like it's too much for you, I'm good with that. If you're not able to do this work and you want to stay in a relationship, chances are I'm going to pull back some because I can't give fully of myself if I can't have that reflected and do that depth of work back. No fault, no blame. It's just how it is. It's interesting. You're not going to hear the pause in this, but my mind went blank. That this is still really challenging work for me. And when I get overwhelmed, my mind just goes blank and I'm like, I have a point to make and I can't remember what it was. So I let them know that, if they went out, I also was feeling concerned because it doesn't even matter where this comes from, but I was concerned that they would not be able to be honest with me if they felt like this was too much and they wanted out. And so I just expressed that concern. And I talked about the reality is I've been through all this before. I've lost relationships. I get that it's going to happen. I can do really hard things. What is more important for me right now is to have people that can show up for me in my relationships. I work really hard and I do deep work, and that's just not for everybody. And I'm really okay if that's not where you're at. This is what goes on for me. I've got to be able to talk about the things that go on for me because this is how I heal. And, I finished up the polo and I left it. And that night I was irrelevant information. My dog has so many issues. And so I have a Pyrex pan that I put her in the bathtub with some warm water and Epsom salt, and I make her soak her feet for 10 minutes. So I just finished soaking her feet in the tub. I have to sit with her so she stays there. As soon as I go in there and I pick up the pan, she leaves the bathroom because she knows what's coming. And my husband came in and opened the door. I'm like, I need the dog in here. Anyways, so I get this polo from my friend in response. And so I'm on the bathroom rug because I just finished drying the dog's feet up. And she mirrors back beautifully what I needed to hear. I didn't realize that this was so hard for you. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. I'm not sure what else she said, but I'm sobbing on my hands and knees on the bathroom rug in the bathroom because I felt so seen and heard. And so I poloed her back and let her know that really, for all the people that I know in my life, and this is not a dig for anybody, I am very, very surprised at how few people have really done their own deep work and can manage somebody else's feelings directly about them in a relationship that really have nothing to do with the other person. It's kind of like me telling my husband that I get resentful about him going on his trip and having a good time. It's not about him. It's about me. He can hold space for that. There are very few friends that I have that I really can talk directly about the pain that I'm feeling in the relationship and that they can hold space and know that it's just about my own process. And this person did this so beautifully. It was just incredibly powerful. So I think that we get this idea of, if we're working on our stuff, then we're not going to have these hurt, angry, jealous feelings. We're not going to make up stories in our head. We're not going to think that people don't want to be in a relationship with us. Like that stuff goes on. And what I was able to really appreciate about this whole process, it was very difficult. It was uncomfortable, but I stayed with it and I did not act out, meaning, and it's funny, the day that I had asked for reassurance and I didn't get it, there was a part of me because feeling powerless, like if you want to make me crazy, don't respond to me. You want to see crazy Patricia come out? Don't respond to me. Because I felt so powerless, what I wanted to do was like, fine, I'm just going to break up with you now. That feeling of having to sit in that discomfort. And I just sat with it and got curious and observed. And then when she had responded and talked about, that she was afraid about running out of data, and she did, it's like I had heard her say that, but because I have unlimited data on my phone, I don't think of texting as using up data. So I couldn't understand, like, how come she wasn't responding to me at night? Like, and from her end, she was giving as much as she could to be able to manage her data and to stay connected with me. And she's really good. Like, she'll go out of town for a couple of days and she'll always say, like, hey, I'm going to be off grid for a couple of days. Like, she's incredibly thoughtful and respectful. But it would be so easy to go into this narrative of like, you didn't respond to me and you don't care, from my woundedness. And I just didn't do that. So I have 9 take-homes for you if you're struggling in relationships. I wish that these felt a little bit more linear to me, but they really don't. If you're having challenges in relationships right now, the most important thing is to really just bring in as much compassion for yourself and for your friends, even if you feel like they're not showing up the way that you want them to, or your partner, or whoever's in your life. The second one is to honor your feelings. Whatever's coming up for you is okay and it's valid. And I think that this is where we get into like, I can't feel resentful and I can't feel hurt and I'm being too much and maybe I'm making a big deal out of it. If it's coming up for you, it's coming up for you. And if you have wounding, chances are you're going to have really young feelings like I did. The only way to heal them is to feel them. That's the only way we're going to work through this. The third thing is to identify what is it that you want. Now, this doesn't mean that you're going to get it, but what is it that you're wanting in this relationship? And how do you want the person to respond? The fourth thing is can the relationship tolerate it? That sometimes relationships can tolerate these things and sometimes they can't. What I would really suggest is if you are starting new relationships, I kind of joke about almost wanting to repel the person, like all the things that we think we don't want people to see because it would scare them away. Use it to test out the relationship and see, can the relationship handle conflict? Can it handle disagreement? So you need to make that assessment. Then the fifth thing is to get really curious about your own stuff. What's coming up for you if you're noticing things with other people? Like I was just talking to a friend and she was asking a friend to show up for her a certain way and the friend kept not showing up. And so my thought was, can you get really curious? Like, what does this bring up for you? But can you ask your friend, like, I'm really curious. I've asked specifically for this thing and I noticed that you don't do it. Help me understand what that's about, not with judgment. Could be that the friend forgets, the friend may make an excuse. We need to look at somebody's actions based on their words. They say something, but then we want to see if they really follow through with actions, but to get really curious. The sixth thing is what are you hearing? And so again, it's like looking at, are we having filters when we ask people things? Oh, I looked at my notes and I couldn't remember what I meant, so I was just making stuff up. I looked at them again, now I get it. Okay. So what is it that you're wanting to hear? If you're feeling really hurt and injured in a relationship and you're wanting somebody to say like, gosh, I'm so sorry. I know I said I would be there for you and I wasn't. And that must feel really awful. That's what you're needing to give yourself. So it's just because you identify it doesn't mean that that's what you're going to tell the other person. But when I get really clear when I'm feeling hurt and injured, that's what I need to tell myself. And I do this thing where I put my hand over my heart. It really helps me to connect. And when I'm feeling those wounds, I really need to go in and be the one to give myself those affirmations. And this is exactly what I did on that morning walk when I asked my friend for reassurance and like there was nothing. I processed through the feelings and I put my hand over my heart and it's like I asked that little young part of me, like, what is it that you're needing? And she's like, that you're going to be here for me, that you're not going anywhere and that you're going to stay with me. You're going to be present for me. And yeah, this sucks. You asked for reassurance and you didn't get it, but how can I give myself that reassurance? So when we get into this script in our head of, I just wish somebody would say so-and-so to me, it's usually an indication that we need to give that to ourselves. It's like there's this parallel process that we do need to hold people accountable. And when we have wounding, we also need to work on those wounds so that we're not so, I don't even have the language for it. I don't want to sound judgmental, but I think for so many years I would run to people trying to get them to say and do the things that would make me feel healed. And we do need some of that from the outside, but if we don't do the work on the inside, it's like filling a bucket that has a hole in it and there's just never enough of it. And so we keep wanting to get this external validation. We need connection. We get our healing from other people. It's not that we don't want that interdependence. That interdependence is really, really important. And if we don't do our own work and learn how to be present for ourselves, whatever we get from the outside is never going to be enough, and we're just going to be setting hoops for people to jump through to try and make us feel better. The other thing to do is to evaluate what the patterns are in relationships. Oftentimes as HSPs, we're great listeners. People come to us for advice. And so we may be doing all of the giving and they may not be reciprocal. Ideally, what you want in a relationship is fluidity. So sometimes it may be 90-10, sometimes it's 10-90. I don't think we really want relationships that are 50-50, but are those relationships reciprocal? And a pattern that I see so much with HSPs, and this is true for myself, I think that when we're young and we have this need to connect, and it's not okay to have needs. So I can't say, I'm lonely, I want you to play with me, I want you to be with me. We get really good at figuring out how to be there for other people. My guess is this starts for us in childhood, that our parents aren't available for us. We are just being kids. So we figure out how to be really helpful. And in that, we get a connection. So we get a sense of value and worth. If it's our parent who has nothing to give to us, they're grateful that we're helping them because we're meeting their need. We get a hit of feel good and connection, and it reinforces that loop. Because we're so observant, because we're great problem solvers, because we have so many skills, I think what we often do, and this is true for me, is I would find out how to make myself useful and helpful to people because I'm really good at it, and people come to me and ask me for it. It gave me a sense of connection. They appreciated me, so it gave me a sense of self-esteem. Now here's the rub. If I do this thing to connect with someone and they don't respond in the way that I expect, which is usually being appreciative, thankful, and then I feel resentful, chances are my motivation for doing it is not pure. Does that mean that I don't want to engage and give and connect? No. But it's really an indication that my reaching out and connecting is not about connecting. It's about trying to feel good. And when I don't get it, I get really irritated, annoyed, hurt, frustrated. Sometimes this happens with gift giving or since COVID started, when we go grocery shopping, there are a few neighbors that will ask if they need anything. And in the process of this, getting really hurt and angry, there's somebody that I cross paths with when I'm outside. And one day we crossed paths and they didn't seem to be exceptionally warm and friendly to me. And because this was during my feeling injured and hurt, and when I came home and, was talking to my husband about how upset I was, it's like, and I'm never getting this person anything ever again because, they don't care about me and they didn't want to talk to me. I was in a highly reactive state, and it's not that that's a bad thing. What I know is I don't say that to this person. I can be reactive and I have safe places that I can go. And when I'm not reactive, then I can decide if I want to continue to do things. And maybe they were having a bad day. But just to recognize that when we get in these highly reactive young places, I'm not going to do anything for you. I don't like you. I do, that place, to allow the feelings, observe it, don't act on it. Do not act on it. Have somebody safe that you can talk to. And then the last two are, especially during COVID, unless you're 100% clear, I would not abandon any relationships. You're not being here for me. You've never been here for me. We're just living in a crazy grass time right now. Just crazy grass without the GR. We're doing the best that we can, but everybody's impaired. I don't know about you. I've got brain fog. I'm forgetful. I have a hard time getting motivated. I'm just barely doing the minimum, showing up for clients. It's just a really hard, stressful time. In the past, I've abandoned relationships. I've cut ties off. And really, I think what I would have preferred to do is to just give them space. Relationships go through seasons. Sometimes it's a chilly, wintry season where there's not a lot going on and we let it go for a while and then we reconnect. Some relationships come into our lives, other relationships go out of our lives. And I think that there was a time when, I learned to be assertive, that I wanted to tell everybody how I was feeling. And it's not that I don't. If the relationship can tolerate it, I will communicate. I can't do that in all relationships. And sometimes you just need to wait or find another place to process things. There's not a clear cut, this is what you do. But if you're having challenges in relationships right now, can you just take a step back? I've talked about this before, like I'm ready to play tennis. I'm on the court and I serve the ball and I'm waiting for the other person to come back and they don't. And then I get frustrated. And they're playing chess. They're going to make a move. They're going to think about it for a couple days and then they're going to respond and not engage. And like, I want to play, it's pacing. And so it's really being mindful about what is it that I want. So what I need to do is maybe I need to have 3 tennis games and 4 chess games going with people so that I get the amount of stimulation that I need, where 1 chess game may be perfect for somebody. So looking at what is the pacing in the relationship, and without having to take a firm stand and end a relationship, can you just take a step back and give relationships some space, especially during COVID right now if you're not sure, because it's just a really hard time. The last one, which is not really going out with a great bang, but, to look at, am I being clear? Am I communicating clearly? That often to me, like with this friend, I was having such huge feelings. And when I asked for reassurance, I was feeling very tearful. And I don't have a problem crying in front of people, but I wanted to be clear that I wasn't coming from a place of looking like I was victim-y or wounded or manipulating them. And so I had to go back and listen to the end of that polo and ask, if you don't know, I use an app called Marco Polo, which, it's a great app. And so when I say polo, I'm talking about leaving a video for someone. I leave a video for them. Then when they're ready, they watch it. They can, leave a video for me when they're ready to. And you can see if the person's watching it while you're recording. And I probably should have said that early on. But anyways, so I went back to listen, like, was I being clear? Because I think when we have a hard time asking for our needs and wants, we go like, can you do this? And we don't say, hey, I need to let you know this is really important to me and this is really hard for me to ask. And I would love if you can do this. If you can't, it's okay. But this is really important. That I think we have such a fear of being rejected, not having our needs met, the anger, frustration, the disappointment that may come up if we ask and we don't get what we want. And so are we being really clear about what it is that we're wanting, and are we really taking those risks? Because again, those attachment wounds are just, man, I'm just seeing how they overlay into so many aspects of our lives, and that fear of being rejected and wanting to feel connected. And, we're wired for connection. And especially right now during COVID, this is just a really hard time and we deserve to have our needs met. So I guess what I would suggest is, to take a look at your relationships. And do you have, I think as HSPs, if we have 1 or 2 relationships that for the most part work, we're pretty darn lucky. We go deep. I don't think that we have the capacity to go deep with a ton of people. If you can, great. But I'm just trying to set the expectations really realistic, because I look at other people and it looks like everybody's connected except for me. I mean, that's kind of my ongoing narrative of everybody has friends except for me. And then I go through these periods where I'm like, I'm so connected. And then I go through other periods where nothing has changed. And I'm like, I don't have any friends. I share that with you because this is kind of what happens when we're going through things and things are hard, that then we pull on that narrative of, whatever that is. What is the take home? We can do hard things. If this resonates with you, I would encourage each and every one of you to write down this statement or something close to it on an index card, at least 3 index cards. I can do hard things. I've done hard things. I can do this. And put it up where you can see it, because we are going through a really challenging time right now. And the truth is, most of us have probably already experienced pretty traumatic, difficult things. Just being HSPs is just what I know about us. And to remind ourselves that when something is feeling difficult, that we've probably been through something just as hard, if not harder, and we got through it. And what did we do to get through it? And how can we be gentle and kind with ourselves? What do we need for support? Do we need to get extra support? I'll tell you, with COVID right now, all the therapists that I know are pretty full, that people are really starting to realize that they need to get support. So if you're needing support, feel free to reach out to me. If I get enough people expressing interest in the HSP online course, I'm happy to run more of them. I'm just not doing big launches anymore because it just takes too much time right now. And with COVID, I'm just not sure. But I've had a couple people reach out to me. So if you're thinking the HSP online course is something that you're interested in, you can go to unapologeticallysensitive.com. There's a tab that says, I think, HSP groups. There's more information there than you could ever want to know. Shoot me an email. Let me know you're interested. I think that this is just a time for us to be really present for ourselves and to really affirm that we can do hard things. We can. And I think that that's what's going to sustain us and get us through that. Yes, we can have big feelings. We can have strong reactions. We can have tender hearts. We may be having challenges in certain areas, but having a practice of gratitude, coming from a place of true gratitude, not toxic positivity, and affirming that when things feel stressful, that we can do this. Part of this training that I'm doing with Diane Poole Heller, Pat Love came on and she talked about stress. And what she was saying is that those people that view stress as a negative have very poor outcomes. And those people that when their heart races and they get sweaty and clammy and they view that as their body getting ready to prepare, have much better outcomes. And I've really been thinking about how does this relate to us as HSPs? It's the same thing that we get strong feelings, we have strong reactions, and if we see that as something positive, this is helping me because I feel things deeply, I care deeply, this is how I operate in life and there's nothing wrong with it and I can do hard things. I really do think that we have the ability to be incredibly resilient and do all kinds of amazing things. And it's up to us to create new narratives and new stories. So if something stressful happens and we go into that old narrative of, I'm too much, this is too hard, nothing ever works out, that's what we're going to create. And so it's up to us or to find somebody to work with who's going to help you to create a new narrative, a new story about, this is hard, I can do hard things. I've done hard things before. This is what I do to get through hard things. Because people... this stuff is going to be going on for a while, depending on where you are. For those of you that are in other countries, this may not be as relevant to you. It's going to be hard for the next bit here moving forward, and we can do it. So I think that's all I have to say. I've been talking for a really long time. My hope is that you are having self-love, self-compassion. You have a little bit of joy in your life, a little bit of nature, time alone, time with people, time with pets, whatever makes you happy and brings you joy. I really appreciate each and every one of you. I don't think I have anything else to say. I always feel like I should have a big bang at the end, and that's just not how I roll. Remember, sensitivity is nothing to apologize for. It's our superpower. Have a blessed day.